himself. And God, I think he's great. So now we come on to a wee bit that's a bit less frivolous. Death is like that. This is about John F. Kennedy. I've been there, you know. I've been on that grassy knoll where he was killed, and I've stood around and I've tried to work it out for myself, because there are people whose lives are consumed by the death of John F. Kennedy. I just thought he was a rather nice bloke. Personally, I don't think he was all that great a politician. But if you sleep with Marilyn Monroe, you've got to get 10 points from somebody. You know what I mean? I thought he was a rather nice guy, you know, if a little awry. But most of my heroes are, anyway. So here's a bit of JFK, see how you feel.
I started shooting when the motorcade started coming in.
Tell us what happened as you took those pictures.
Well, as the car came in line, I was shooting through a telephoto lens, and as it reached about here, I heard the first shot, and I saw the president lean over and grab himself like this.
Grab himself on the front of his chest.
For a moment, I thought it was, you know, like you say, oh, he got me when you hear a shot. I don't think the president's going to make jokes like this. But before I had a chance to organize my mind, I heard the second shot, and I saw that his head opened up, and the blood and everything came out, and I started... I can hardly talk about it.
Isn't it moving, that thing they do? You know, when you're a famous guy and you die, and they get the horse and they put your boots backwards in the stirrups. The first time I saw it was at Mountbatten's funeral. They had his boots backwards in it, but no guy on the horse. I thought it was the most moving thing I ever saw. When I was a teenager, the most extraordinary thing happened. I was an apprentice welder on the Clyde, and the first thing that happened was the Russians sent a wee football-shaped thing into space called a Sputnik, and bleep bleep became the noise of the century. Everywhere you went, bleep bleep was written, and bleep bleep was a funny word for comedians, because that was the message when it was going round in orbit, and go doot, 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 doot. But then shortly after that, to the terror of America, Russia then sent the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. And he was a nice-looking guy, and he changed the world. We would never... Funnily enough, he died a few years ago in a plane crash, which seems kind of unjust to me. I don't know who's writing his script, but he's got a sick sense of humour, you know what I mean? Don't you think? Say, we'll put him in space, and then we'll let him go up in a wee biplane. And just when he's confident, good night! So this is the first man in space. Have a look, see what you think.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the news. All Moscow is waiting to give a hero's welcome to the world's first spaceman, Major Gagarin of the Soviet Air Force. Major Gagarin was sent up in his 4.5-ton spaceship from somewhere in the Soviet Union. As he looked down on the Earth from the loneliness of space, he streaked across Asia, Africa, and South America, controlling the pitch and roll of the ship.
Man in space at the show.
Excuse me, what do you think of the news?
I think it's fantastic.
Well, I can tell you he's now back, safe and sound.
Really? I didn't think you would get back.
Man in space.
What do you feel
official.
about this generally? Do you think the Russians have whacked us?
Definitely. I really do. I think it's a marvelous achievement. I think there'll soon be a man on the moon at this rate.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Roger, 11. We'll pass that on, and it certainly looks like you're well on your way now. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Did you ever read the report of what these guys left on the moon? Bags of urine. So if there is a man on the moon, he's going to be seriously pissed off, right? Don't you think? I mean, anyway, there you go. So, the next is an interesting piece. It's the Berlin Wall. But the thing that irritates me, personally myself, is that they rave away about the Berlin Wall as if it was the greatest thing that ever happened, pulling it down, which is fair enough, and they've got a point there. But there's a lot of walls, you know, and I wouldn't be quite happy, as happy as Larry, until they're all down. Because I think it would be a shame if you think by pulling down the Berlin Wall, that was the job finished. There are many, many walls, and some of them are not desperately far from where we're sitting right now. But this is the Berlin Wall. Let's have a wee look at that.
The Berlin Wall went up in August 1961, after an exodus of East Germans had threatened to get out of hand, just as it has in recent months. Between January and August 1961, more than 150,000 East Germans had fled west. The East German regime panicked and decided to build a permanent barrier in Berlin itself.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia,
Did you see that film, the black and white film of the woman running and getting her neck caught in the wire? Happily, she seems to be okay afterwards there. But I've seen that lots of times, that clip, on various news programs, and it happens. I mean, she's probably like 60 now, you know, that woman, and she's watching herself getting that for the rest of her life, you know. And it always reminds me, there's a Scottish writer, Alan Sharp, an incredibly bright writer. He wrote Rob Roy, but the movie. And he wrote once about Greenock in his childhood that they were being chased by the police and they were running through the tenements, you know. And they were running through the tenements, through the back greens and over walls, and the police after them. And he was last, and this man was last in line, running along. And he ran into somebody's washing line, right? Whoop, and he went up in the air, and he shouted to his mates, "Run, lads, the bastards have lassoed me." The next item is in 1967, and it means a very great deal to me. But going into work one night in 1967 was the night of the European Cup final, and Celtic were playing, and I'll let you see it here.
On the football field, Scotland scored with Celtic. Despite an early setback in their European Cup final with Inter Milan in 1967, they fought back.
Kimberly scored a great goal! He's done it!
5 minutes left now. 1 goal each. Kimmel. Further. It's goal!
Yes!
Celtic were the Lisbon Lions, and the fans went wild. At Parkhead, they gathered in their thousands for the homecoming. The cup was held aloft. There was just one word for it: ecstasy.
Yes. The first British team to do it. Not the first Scottish team, the first British team to do it. And no, I think it should be remembered, you know. It's not that I'm all too keen on Celtic. Yes! No. And the manager was Jock Stein, and he was such a nice man. I knew him personally. I didn't hang out with him or anything, but I used to meet him in places, and we would always have a good laugh. And you know, I don't think they have the expression here in Ireland, but in Scotland, the thin end of a building is called the gable end. You know, if it's a long row of tenements, the thin end is the gable end. And Jock, even when he was a football player, had a problem with his weight. If you see any films of him when he was a player, he's a stocky guy, big boned, and retaining water, slow metabolism, and fat. But he obviously bugged him, you know, even when he was a hugely successful manager on the European world stage. And we used to meet, and I was skinnier than I am now. And he was always on about me, obviously ate away at him. And one night, it was the nicest line, he said, "Look at you, you bugger. You're like the gable end of a £1 note." Right? I still think it's a staggeringly good line, you know. And he was a football manager. So it's a particular, I won't put any phony sadness on it for you, but it was a very sad day when Jock died. We have a clip of it here.
As Cooper's success opened the way to Mexico, 80 minutes of suspense was swept away. Stein, however, showed little emotion. Minutes later, he argued with a photographer asking for a clear view of the pitch, but no one will ever know if that argument led to his collapse. Everyone rushed up the tunnel to call for help as the Scotland manager was carried to the dressing room, and even at the final whistle, the players were kept on the pitch. There were chaotic scenes as friends and players waited for news. Ambulances were already at the ground and life-saving equipment was rushed in to try to resuscitate Mr. Stein, but he died before many of his loyal supporters had even left Ninian Park. A number of Stein's lifelong friends couldn't hide their shock at his death. But what of the supporters who'd followed Scotland during Stein's reign?
Very, very sad.
Shocked.
Very sad.
Yeah, that was Jock. He was a great guy. Yeah, you would have liked him if you met him, I promise you. But go, clap if you like, yeah. Such a nice man. It's funny, I had dinner one night with George Harrison, and I'd called somebody man, you know, as I do. I'm an old hippie. Yeah, sure, man. And I said to George, you know, isn't man a great word? I said, it comes in so handy, you know, when you forget people's names. And he said, I enjoy being a man. And I thought, oh, Christ. You know, I'd never met him before, and I thought, oh, God, I was hoping for better than this, you know. And he said, oh, I enjoy being a man. He said, we were the boys for so bloody long. And I thought, yes!